Well, as you know, we called for this emergency meeting of the Security Council to explain as fully as possible our position on the current situation in Ukraine. And I sense that colleagues received with particular attention a document which I displayed in the Council in the course of my remarks. And this is a statement which was made by the President of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, an appeal which he addressed to President Putin. I think it's significant in terms of the message he is sending and his description of the situation in Ukraine. And I have an official translation of the statement, so I'd like to read to you this unofficial translation. Statement by the President of Ukraine. As a lawfully elected President of Ukraine, I state the following. Developments on the Maidan, illegal seizure of power in Kiev, have pushed Ukraine to the brink of civil war. The country has plunged into chaos and anarchy. Lives, safety, and rights of people, particularly in the southwest and the southeast and the Crimea, are at risk. The country is in the grip of outright terror and violence driven by the West. People are persecuted on political and language grounds. In this context, I appeal to the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, to use the armed forces of the Russian Federation to re-establish the rule of law, peace, order, stability, and to protect the people of Ukraine. Viktor Yanukovych, March 1, 2014. And I can show to you the photocopy of the original of this statement, which was written by President Yanukovych and sent by President Putin. Now you have followed the debate, I hope, so I'll take some questions if you have any. Matthew.
Sure. Thanks a lot. I noticed that toward the end you said that you expressed some support for the mission of Jan Eliasson, if I understood it correctly. What do you see his mission as being, and do you think, unlike Mr. Seri, he actually could go to the Crimea and speak with the authorities?
I think the first stage, as it was explained to us, and I talked with Mr. Eliasson before his departure to Ukraine. First of all, he wants to explore the situation in Kiev. And then he will figure out, together with the Secretary General, what his next steps could be.
Thank you, Ambassador. You showed us this letter from Mr. President Yanukovych. Is Russia going to restore order and peace in Kiev?
Well, it is the people of Ukraine who ultimately are going to restore peace and political process and democracy in Ukraine. Our concern is the possibility, which we fear can be quite real, of the violence which we have seen in the past 2 or 3 months in Kiev and in some western and central regions of Ukraine can spread to the eastern and southern parts of Ukraine and to the Crimea. In the Crimea, as you know, certain measures have been taken by the authorities of that autonomous republic and also by the Russian Black Sea Fleet, which is present there. In other regions which are concerned about the possibility of the spread of violence. And let me emphasize that the concern is not purely theoretical, because they have seen administrative buildings in the capitals of those regions attacked by people from outside, trying to establish control of those administrative buildings. And of course, they have been watching what has been happening in, as I say, in the west and the central parts of the country and in Kiev. So obviously they would not want to see those things repeated on the territory of their regions.
Allow me a follow-up, please.
Mr. Ambassador, inside you say that practically Russia is doing a kind of a human rights. It's like a responsibility to protect. Like, look, this is the way. But then Ambassador Power said that there is no sign of all the violence that you were talking about. And then you say to her, you responded saying that maybe she watched too much TV or something like this. It looks like here the discussion in the cool heads that the Deputy Secretary General was talking Saturday is not happening. No, there are no cool heads around. Can you tell us what the Ukrainian, the Russian, what should be done to have a little bit of cooling heads so the discussion can be more productive?
Well, first of all, I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, I think my my head is pretty cool. But I think I indicated when I talked in the chamber that first of all, it must be clear, and it must not simply be declared, but we must see the effects of that on the ground. That those who found themselves of those powers that be in Kiev and those who support them, and those who have engineered this coup d'etat in Kiev, essentially taking power by force, they should stop any attempts to transmit this kind of a trend, this wave of violence, which we saw coming from the west, from Kiev, and then spreading to central and western regions of Ukraine, not to try to spread those waves of violence to other regions of Ukraine. And then, of course, if that happens, our recipe is that we must go to the format of a February 21 agreement, which even though some say Mr. Yanukovych is not there already, and in fact he is not there, but the other very important elements are there. They need to have a constitutional process which will provide produce a constitution satisfactory to all the regions and political segments of Ukraine, the goal of establishing a government of national unity, etc., etc. So this is our recipe for what needs to be done.
A lot of countries and our members of Security Council asked Russia to withdraw the army from Crimea. When do you think that this would happen, and when do you feel that the people in the Russia people feel safe?
The Black Sea Fleet is there under the agreement we had with Ukraine. I think signed by sometimes in the 90s. So there is a legal presence now. And continues to be a legal presence of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So the question is not withdrawing the Black Sea Fleet. That is not something which is on the agenda now.
Ambassador, thank you. Very.
I'm not doing OSCE. I'm sorry.
Mr. Ambassador, I mean similar.
Because I'm ambassador to the United Nations. I'm not responsible. No, I cannot speak for our positions on position on OSCE because I'm ambassador to the United Nations, and we have supported a trip by Mr. Eliasson and his effort to look into the situation in Ukraine.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you. But while all these are happening in Ukraine, there's also Syria, a big tragedy there. Your actions in Ukraine contradict the policies that you have pursued on Syria. Why is this contradiction?
I don't see any contradiction.
Ambassador, can I just ask you one simple question? It may sound obvious, but I want you to make this quite clear. That letter you got there, do you believe that letter makes your military intervention in Crimea legal?
Well, we believe that the President of the Russian Federation has a legal mandate from Federation Council. But I think, and what triggered this a letter which President Putin sent to Federation Council to authorize him to be able to use the Russian armed forces on the territory of Ukraine. He made this request of the Federation Council, and the Federation Council provided him with a mandate. But I think it's important to realize that the person who we believe legally is President of Ukraine also shares our concerns, shares the concerns of large segments of the Ukrainian population about what is going on, and is appealing to Russia to use our armed forces in order to change the situation and to prevent the situation from further deteriorating.
Mr. Ambassador, since the parliament in Russia gave the authority to the president to move forces into the Ukraine, but not to the Crimea, but they said the Ukraine as a whole, do you see a scenario where your forces have to move into eastern parts of the Ukraine to protect Russian minorities?
I don't want to discuss any scenarios, but we have said repeatedly that our concern is that, and the concern of people there, that the people in eastern and southern parts of Ukraine are very worried about the current trends.
Inside the council, you refer to the Autonomous Republic of the Crimea. Is that a separate entity than Ukraine?
No, this is something which is prescribed in the constitution of Ukraine. They have an autonomous status under the constitution. It's another aspect of the situation, but I'm simply giving you some information that they want to have a referendum on expanding their autonomous status, but it's a completely different matter. Please.
Ambassador, is entering these chamber, you have said that you came actually to explain in more detail Russian policy. Then you offered some of the rather pictures of how do you see it. But are you now convinced that you really have a real response that you have expected from the Security Council member, or you would agree that overwhelmingly that was a condemnation of your action in Ukraine?
Oh, well, first of all, I don't see the overall discussion which has taken place in the Security Council, even though there were some strong words, but I would not describe the tenure of the entire discussion as a condemnation. And then the purpose of having an open meeting is to appeal to a broader community. So I hope as a result of what we have said today and in previous meetings of the Security Council, and the result of what I'm trying to also explain in response to your question, is that the international community will better understand where we're coming from, especially if you report the results of today's discussions objectively.
There has been a document going around regarding Russian military forces that are asking Ukrainian Navy sailors to depart some ships by 6 o'clock, or there will be open fire. Can you describe? Okay.
I know there is a lot of disinformation. I'm not sure whether it's this particular document, which I have not seen. Yeah.
What threat do the sailors pose to the Russian-speaking people in the Crimea?
I'm sorry?
What threat do the Ukrainian sailors pose to the?
I'm not able to respond to your question because I'm not sure. I have no information about this kind of documents. Please.
So much. The State Department of United States said we are going to make some sanction against Russia. Do you have any comment about these sanctions?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
State Department of United States said.
No, it's just, I don't want to speculate about the future. Ma'am.
Majority of the members of the Security Council mentioned that it was no proof of humanitarian need for Russia to come into that area. Is Russia prepared to have a meeting where a proof is presented either?
Well, I think I covered it quite extensively. The proof is what happened in the west and central regions of the country and in Kiev, violent attacks on administrative buildings and all the violence directed towards people who represented authority. And the proof is that there have been some attempts to do the same in eastern and southern parts, particularly in the eastern parts of Ukraine, including the administration of the Autonomous Republic of the Crimea. So for the people who actually live there, they need no proof to be concerned. And we need no further proof to say that we are not able to allow the same things to happen in eastern and southern Ukraine, while some international structures are discussing what they can or cannot do in order to control the situation. Maybe two more questions. No, you asked your question already, please.
Given the rancor and the situation as it exists at this point in time, do you think this is there is some sort of a way out of this crisis, and that do you see light at the end of the tunnel?
I do. In fact, I already addressed that. I think there are two elements. Just drop this policy of intimidation and drop this idea that you simply can impose some revolutionary or rule on other regions of Ukraine. And of course, you need to return. We think that February 21 is an excellent basis on which a political process can be organized.
You've mentioned several times meddling by Western countries in the situation. We know the National Endowment of Democracy and NGOs. We know about the Newland tape. We know that she visited the square and gave cookies out, and McCain has been there. My question is, would this uprising have taken place without Western backing, financial and others? And do you see that as a provocation against Russia?
Well, first, I'd like to repeat what I said in the chamber in response to the comments by my Ukrainian colleague. Of course, there was a large amount of popular unrest in Ukraine, no question about it. And very large segments of Ukrainian population, large crowds came to the Maidan to express their legitimate concerns about what was going on in Ukraine and the mismanagement of Mr. Yanukovych and his government. No question about that. But very early in the process, this peaceful political protest was hijacked by national extremists. And I would suggest that actually they were the ones who, by force, brought to power those people who are there in the government and presenting a more likable image to the West. And yes, we believe that, I don't want to go too far into various conspiracy scenarios, but it's quite obvious that there was a heavy involvement of outside factors in what happened, and they bear a large part of responsibility for the crisis coming to this point. And in the previous meeting, I spoke at some detail about what things could have been and should have been avoided. Unfortunately, they took the strategy of raising the ante all the time. And I mean, someone must have worked against that agreement, which was signed on February 21 with the support of 3 ministers from the European Union. Somebody must have been behind it being derailed. Maybe those who, as we all know, expressed their strong dissatisfaction with the work of the European Union in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Do you accept fact finding?
Bonjour. Nous avons donc tenu une réunion du Conseil de sécurité à la demande de la Fédération de Russie et nous avons été extrêmement déçus par cette réunion qui ne nous a rien apporté de nouveau. Nous avons vu un ambassadeur de Russie agiter un papier d'un président renversé, nous dire qu'il y avait des nazis qu'il fallait battre et d'une certaine manière, nous avons eu l'impression d'être 50 ans en arrière. Vous l'avez entendu. Et donc c'est un moment extrêmement triste. C'est un moment que nous regrettons, car nous pensons que la seule solution doit être une solution politique. What I said was, as you know, we had a meeting of Security Council at the request of the ambassador of the Russian Federation. We were extremely disappointed, because what did we see? We saw a Russian ambassador, using a piece of paper, signed by a deposed president, saying that we were threatened by Nazism, and basically justifying the Russian occupation of Crimea, part of Ukraine. We were 50 years back. 50 years back. This meeting was unfortunately totally useless. We were hoping that the ambassador of the Russian Federation would agree, would tell us that the Russian Federation is agreeing to a negotiation, to agreeing to a mediation, but actually no. The government of Kiev has no legitimacy. It's Yanukovych is the only president, while nobody knows where he is, and certainly not in Ukraine anymore. And actually, the Russian army is protecting a population against a threat that nobody has so far detected. So again, it's regrettable, but we do hope that eventually all the political efforts will draw Russia to the table of negotiation and will convince Russia to withdraw its forces from Crimea back to their barracks. Yes.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, une question en français. Vous avez à plusieurs reprises comparé ce qui se passe avec l'intervention russe à la guerre froide, et vous venez de le refaire. Est-ce que finalement, ce n'est pas une manière de reconnaître ce que beaucoup disent, c'est-à-dire que les opportunités, la possibilité pour l'Occident de faire quoi